Chow time!
It's time.
What's that? That is called It's got a little bit of pescetti in there. Toenails. Rat shit. Everything a grown fella needs like you.
Recently, it came to my attention that in honor of Avengers Endgame, there was this big film YouTuber assembly project called One Marvelous Scene. Essentially, the point of this project was to pick one great MCU scene and examine why it's great, with every prominent film YouTuber being invited to do this. You know, every prominent film YouTuber except fucking me. So, since these massive channels with millions of subs don't view my measly 5-digit sub channel as worthy of an invite, I'm gonna do what I did back in my school days, where I also was never invited to anything. I'm gonna have my own party. And instead of doing what everyone else is doing, we're going to do the exact opposite. Instead of examining the best Marvel scene, we're going to examine the worst DC scene. And since we're talking about the absolute worst of DC, the best choice of a movie to find it in is this one. What, with some kind of Suicide Squad? I know I like to throw punches at Justice League here because that to me is the most disappointing entry in the DCEU. But if we forget expectations and only objectively look at quality or lack thereof, Suicide Squad takes the cake. And it's not even close. This thing is one of the messiest, overall worst movies I've ever seen, like almost up there with I, Frankenstein. And while there are plenty of bad scenes to choose from, there is one that stands out. One scene that serves as the main source of all the problems that this movie has. The opening dinner scene. Without any further ado, fellas and fellarettes, let's get into it. Let's take a look at this One DC-sastrous scene in Suicide Squad and examine it closer. What it is, what it does, what are the core issues with it. How the frick it manages to achieve the highly contested and nigh unachievable title of the worst DCEU scene of all time. Because forget about coming together for a common cause. It's time for a movie YouTuber civil war. And so now, the choice is yours. Do you choose Marvel scene content and side with these arrogant, high and mighty sons of bitches with their millions of subs? Or do you choose to make DC scene content and take the side of little ol' me? Either way, I don't really care. Like I said, I've never been invited to anything, so I'm already used to being alone. In essence, the dinner scene that I'm talking about goes like this. Amanda Waller sits with these random government people talking exposition about the characters that the Suicide Squad will consist of. It's not really even a real scene as much as it is a 20-minute long series of unconnected moments that makes up pretty much the entire first act of the movie. And that right there is one of its main problems. The problem of no central point of view. We start the movie off in Deadshot's point of view, thinking that, oh, this must be his story. He's the guy I should care about. But before you can even try doing so, we suddenly jump away from him and into Harley Quinn's point of view. Okay, well, it must be her story. She's the character I should try caring about. Oh, now we're in Batman's POV. And now in Captain Boomerang's POV. And then. The issue with this type of unanchored, rapid-fire storytelling is that the audience never gets access to the story because we have no clear central point of view to experience the story from. It's all just meaningless noise. It's like we're watching quick teaser trailers for multiple different movies, and as a result, we can never create an emotional connection with any of them.
Daddy, please.
Zoe, move!
Please, Daddy, don't do it.
Oh no, how sad. He will lose his daughter. How so very sad. Captain Boomerang.
I understand that you have to introduce all the members of the Suicide Squad, but you don't have to do it at the same fucking time, because simply introducing a character is not enough. You have to make the audience care about at least one of them, one central main protagonist that anchors the movie. Once you have that, then you can start moving on to the others. And now it works, because there's a clear central point of view that the narrative can be followed through. The same way that our main protagonist is getting introduced to the new characters, so is the audience. You could maybe argue that this sequence is anchored in Amanda Waller's POV, which would be a fair argument if not for the fact that she's not a main protagonist of this movie. She's barely even in this movie, and when she is, it's more as an antagonist. So no, when Ocean's 11 begins, it doesn't begin with a 20-minute information dump montage introducing all the characters at once. It begins with Danny Ocean. When Lord of the Rings begins, it doesn't begin at the ring meeting with Hugo Weaving introducing all the characters at once. It begins with Frodo. You can eventually branch into multiple perspectives if the narrative requires it, but you first need to anchor the story in one perspective that grants the audience access to the story in order to create an emotional connection with it. And the issue with this opening montage sequence in Suicide Squad is that it never does.
You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
I know I've brought up the topic of showing instead of telling before, multiple times, to the point where it's getting a bit obvious and repetitive. But that said, I will keep bringing it up until Hollywood gives me a reason to stop, something which the opening sequence in Suicide Squad is not. Because the second core issue with this dinner sequence is the fact that even though it has the highly crucial task of setting up plotlines and narrative information that the rest of the movie is built on, it never bothers to visually prove any of it. For example, the entire third act of Suicide Squad depends solely on the love relationship between Rick Flag and the woman possessed by the Enchantress. And since this is the case, you'd think that this sequence then spends actual time to establish this love relationship in a solidifying, undeniable way. Does it? Well, see for yourself.
I assigned him to watch Dr. Moon, and just as I hoped, it got personal.
Are you gonna kiss me or not?
If you didn't catch it, here it is again. In one shot, we see Rick Flag meeting the woman for the first time. In the next shot, we see them totally in love. And what evidence is provided to the audience to actually back up the claim that this is real love? Well, the narration says so. Nice. The other great example of this problem is Harley Quinn. Throughout this sequence, Harley Quinn is constantly alluded to be this terrifying villain by pretty much everyone. Oh, she's crazy, she's insane, she's dangerous, she requires multiple armed guards to be controlled. And while the movie does visually back up the claim that Harley is crazy, it never backs up the claim that she's dangerous, because despite all this ominous talk, we never actually see her do anything that would justify everyone being so unnerved by her. The only thing we do see her do is stuff like this.
God help anyone who disrespected the Queen.
And not only that, sometimes what this movie shows actually discredits what it says. As in, the movie tells us one thing and then shows us the exact opposite.
She's crazier than him and more fearless. And more fearless.
The reason this factor of telling instead of showing is so frustrating is because it's very demeaning toward the audience. Because essentially, it means that you like to reap the rewards without putting any actual work into it. And even more, it also kinda signals that you view your audience as nothing but a bunch of gullible idiots who will think something is true just because you say so. To be fair, this isn't always the case. Sometimes Suicide Squad does show stuff too. But even then, the problem of telling still remains. Meaning, even though this movie shows us something, it still, for some reason, feels the need to tell it as well, so that we get the same information twice. It's a problem in this voiceover sequence, it's a problem throughout the entire film, because very clearly, this film thinks we are all a bunch of idiots.
Tell everybody. Everything.
The fact is, when I go to the movies, I wanna see a story. If I wanted someone to tell me a story, I'd just stay at home and listen to an audiobook.
ここで私の人生が終わればやっとあなたと一緒になれる
Man who killed her husband used that sword.
Yeah, no, I got that.
His soul's trapped inside of it.
Yeah, I understood.
Talks to him.
Okay, yes, you just showed me. You don't have to tell me stuff I already know, Rick Flag. I'm not a fucking moron. Building on both previous points, the only way you can really make the audience care about and take interest in a character is by making them understand who that character is. And since this opening sequence decides to introduce all the characters at once, it utilizes these stylistic walls of text to distinguish them by their powers and abilities. But even though it is all very clear, it doesn't really work. Why is that? Because all it does is tell us what these characters are on the outside, not who they are on the inside. Crocodile Man, oh, he's a man crocodile. Soldier Man, oh, he's a soldier. The Witch, yeah, she's a witch. Harley Quinn, oh, she's crazy, she's like the female Joker. Even with Amanda Waller, she's portrayed to be this super tough government lady, but we never get a sense as to why. Why is she so obsessed with putting this team of crooks together? Why does she have no problems shooting her own employees later on? What does she want? Why does she want it? Who is she? Why should I care about her? To give this movie some credit, some character introductions are a bit better. El Diablo's gloomy downfall is okay, mostly because they keep it all very vague. Deadshot's relationship with his daughter is okay too, even though it is pretty generic.
That's not true. That's a lie.
However, the best character introduction and the best character in the movie in general is Captain Boomerang. Because with Captain Boomerang, we not only get a clear sense of what he is, but also who he is as a person.
We're gonna be rich. Hey, you and me, mate. Go and get the car.
He robbed every bank in Australia at least once. Then he came to America for a fresh target set.
Based on what you just saw, Captain Boomerang is a selfish backstabber who wants nothing else than to satisfy his own endless greed and betray others in the process. That's who he is. The fact that he throws boomerangs is secondary information. And now that we have an idea of who he is and how he should act, we have interest in him as he progresses through the story. His choices work, his actions work, the jokes he's in work, and his ending works because when he finally chooses others over himself, we can clearly see that he has changed as a person. He has a clear character arc. And if this movie was only about Captain Boomerang, it might have been great. The problem is, it's not. Outside of maybe El Diablo and maybe in some sense also Deadshot, none of the other characters go through any kind of changes. And how could they? Because we're never shown who any of them are to begin with. Why is Harley Quinn into the Joker, other than because the movie says she's crazy? Why does Killer Croc wanna eat people, other than because the movie says he looks like a crocodile? Why does the ancient witch wanna take over the world, other than because the movie says she's an ancient witch? I don't know, and I don't care. Not about them, not about this sequence, not about this movie. The last point I want to talk about is the point that pisses me off about this sequence and this movie in general the most. That point being the very unfaithful way it handles some of its most prominent characters just because the narrative requires it. In total, there are 3 prominent DC characters in this movie: Batman, the Joker, and Harley Quinn. These are names that pretty much everybody has a clear knowledge of, and so that knowledge is something you have to be faithful to. I'm not saying you can't take new directions with these characters, but I am saying that you have to respect the essentials of who they are and how they appear in other relevant media. And to anyone who knows anything about these characters, this movie is like one massive metaphorical middle finger. Starting with Batman, luckily he's in this movie too briefly for it to make a difference. I'm not really a fan of how he engages Deadshot when he's with his daughter and then says that he doesn't want to do this in front of his daughter, which makes no sense, but whatever. The real problems begin with the Joker. Even though it'd be very easy to point out how he looks like an edgy hot topic version of himself, that's not my real main issue with him. I can't get over a new look of a character. What I can't get over is the fact that the actions of that character are in direct logical conflict with the rules and norms set up not only by their own history but also by the narrative that they currently inhabit, something which is very much the case in this dinner montage sequence.
Hey Jay, on behalf of everybody, welcome back. I wanted to come by and personally say thank you. You're making me good money, making you good money.
What you just saw makes no sense. Firstly, because it goes completely against who this character is meant to be. Like, we have this random thug who just strolls in to meet the Joker, which is like, what? You don't just go meet the Joker. The Joker isn't someone who just hangs around with other people. At the fuck? f***ing club. The second reason this makes no sense is because it breaks the rules of the movie itself. This movie already established that Harley Quinn assisted the Joker in killing Robin, which means that this Joker is the Joker who killed Robin. And so you're telling me that the Joker is just openly hanging out at the club and Batman doesn't show up to get him. Like, Batman will show up to get the Deadshot in front of his little girl, but not the guy who pretty much killed his f***ing son. That makes no sense.
Batman does go after Joker in the next part of the montage, but that is presented as random and unconnected. If the Joker was at the club purposefully to draw out Batman, that's great, but then actually establish that. Don't have the Joker just loiter around without motive and reason for doing so. That's not who he is. Also, someone remind Batman that this woman he's rescuing killed his sidekick.
Then there's also Harley Quinn, and the problem with Harley Quinn is best summed up with this gearing up scene. It's not the dinner sequence we're talking about, but whatever.
What?
This joke about Harley Quinn's sexualization.
What followed was an endless monologue explaining in a much too detailed way how Harley Quinn isn't just a crazy clueless idiot, but instead someone who underneath all that crazy is dangerously smart, which shouldn't be that hard to understand seeing as she is a competent psychiatrist. When Harley Quinn is sexualized, it's because she knows how to use her looks to gain an advantage on others. This thing dressing up in trashy clothing in front of everyone and then cluelessly wondering why everyone is looking is not that. Stop sexualizing Harley purely for the sake of sexualizing her. Stop making her dumb.
Harley, why don't you stop acting like a drunken stripper?
What?
Anyway, I guess where I'm getting at is this. Suicide Squad is a prime example of the fact that DC and Warner Brothers have no respect for the characters that they own the rights to, and how they have no problems with whoring them out in any way if that means earning that one extra buck. And if you somehow disagree with me, consider this. If DC and Warner Brothers really did have any respect for these characters, would they let them guest star as themselves in a fucking Skrillex music video about purple Lamborghinis? Like, Jesus Christ.